which they worship. Remember, the temple could not thrive if the community in which it was located was not thriving. Churches and their communities are linked together. As is always the case, there were outside groups who benefited from Jerusalem's disrepair and who wanted to see it remain in ruins. They feared the increased competition of a rebuilt Jerusalem. So as Nehemiah organized Jerusalem's families to reconstruct the wall, he also had to contend with these opponents, including people who presented themselves as his friends, but were actually working for his enemies. As the wall rises, so does the intensity of his opposition. There are also conflicts that arise among the people of Jerusalem themselves, because it turns out that some wealthy Israelites were exploiting poorer Israelites by charging them high interest, so that poor families were actually falling further into poverty. Certainly, such practices were contrary to their covenant with God. Yet Nehemiah, being a man of justice, heard these complaints of the poor and demanded that the practices stop. This brings us to the fifth principle. Any effort to rebuild our communities will bring on conflict, because there are powerful interests that benefit from the community being broken. Yet people of faith have to hold fast to their beliefs and insist on justice, even if the evildoers might be one of their own. Now this finally brings me to the passage that was read for today. Here in chapter 5, verses 14 to 19, we learn of Nehemiah's selfishness in his appointed role as the governor of the land of Judah. Unlike earlier governors, neither he nor his brothers ate the food allowances that governors normally received, nor took the provisions of wine and food from the people. He had no desire for personal gain, even though he devoted years of his life to the task of rebuilding. Instead, Nehemiah practices a form of radical hospitality, which I believe is a deep manifestation of spirituality. Radical hospitality grows out of a deep understanding that God provides to us in abundance, but in the expectation that we will give that away. This brings me to the final principle, which is that community rebuilding cannot primarily be seen as something that we do for our own benefit. It is a means of acting out God's grace and love, which must be given away, not held onto as though it is somehow in limited supply, just enough for a few of us. We cannot ask the question, how is this going to benefit us? But rather, how can we benefit others? Ultimately, in the act of generosity, we will receive in return. Our churches were not built to just serve us, but to enable us to serve our communities. So I believe the challenge is for us to become Nehemiahs, catalysts, not the ones with all the answers, but the ones with the vision and values to lead a larger process of rebuilding. May God bless us in that task. Amen.